Well, hey, you, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Hippie Podcast. I'm your host, Michaela. I'm here with my co host, Willie the Corky. Tank and Daisy the Corky are somewhere. If they walk back in on the wood floor and you hear a little just know it's Tank or Daisy. Today, I wanted to talk about movies, how I've used movies to help with my personal development and healing journey, also how you can use movies to help with your healing and personal development journey. What I believe the self-help industry as a whole has gotten wrong about watching movies. And then also I recently watched Harry Potter, so it won't be related to the books, but in regards to the movies, I am going to share the most recent lesson I learned from rewatching the movies over Christmas break, and then give you a couple action steps of how you can intentionally watch movies and use movies to help find parts of yourself that maybe you have buried, maybe you forgot they were there, and how we can learn lessons from our favorite movies. Because I truly believe that the reason that our favorite movies are our favorite movies is because we both have something to learn from the character as well as the journey and the story itself. So, without further ado, let's get into it. I'm really excited to talk about this because to start with what I believe the self-help industry has gotten wrong about movies, I quit watching movies for the longest time when I got into the self-help space because there was this dialogue of every minute you waste watching TV or watching a movie, you could be living your dreams, man. I don't know why I felt the need to change my voice for that, but I did. Um, and it so I listen. I don't know about you, but I'm a very if I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna go all out. I'm gonna do it to the best of my ability, and then I'm gonna do it better than even the best of my ability. Not always a great approach, and I'm working on that. We'll get into that in a different episode. But I totally applied this approach with watching movies. Not only am I not gonna watch movies, I'm not gonna watch TV, and I just cut it out of my life. But the thing was, I wasn't, since going to film school, my perspective on who watches a lot of movies has changed a lot because compared to some of my friends who I went to school with who movies are their life, it's their hobby, it's their livelihood. They go to the movie theaters a few times a week. They watch multiple, sometimes 2 to 3 movies a day because that is their um for me, it's like with our horses, we ride after work. It's like a second job because that's just what brings us joy and, what we love. Compared to that, I've never been a huge movie watcher. However, when I was younger, I would watch about a movie a day. I would go to the movie theaters with my friends every now and again. And then about 2017, 2018, when I get into the personal development space and the lingo was to not watch movies, I just totally cut it out. But the thing was, it did bring me a certain amount of joy. I did enjoy watching movies. I'm thinking of, when I really, this is like interesting because I always had a movie on in the background, but when I really realized I enjoyed watching movies was actually watching the remake of Footloose. I love Miles Teller. I love Miles Teller in the remake of Footloose. And I just loved watching him bring this character to life. I loved falling in love with character Willard. And yeah, just totally cut that out. And I actually was in therapy in 2019, so really went without watching movies for a year and a half, 2 years. Of course, I would watch one every now and again, but I can't really consciously tell you other than I think I went and saw the live action Beauty of the Beast in theater. Um, really can't tell you the movies that I watched during that time period unless I was at a friend's house or um, where now the last few years I can tell you all the movies I've watched. And was at therapy and she said, "What do you do for fun?" And this was in 2019. I said nothing. I do you know when someone asks you a question and you just get this blank look on your face because there was a blank space in my head. Like, what do you do for fun? Uh, what is fun? Question mark. Uh, Fun is for squares. I think that's something SpongeBob said at some point. We don't do fun. What are you talking about? And the irony of it all is the whole point of going on this healing journey in the first place is to learn to enjoy life again. And so we tend to cut these things out that bring us joy in the first place. And so she just started, God bless her. She just started asking me questions like, do you like doing this? And she's like, do you enjoy watching movies? And I said, well, yes. However, and I told her what I had just told you when I got into personal development, da 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 da. And she kind of just rolled her eyes, and she was the one who really put this awareness in my head. The whole point of doing this is so that we can enjoy life again, so that we can live our lives again, so we can take our life back from the trauma of our past. And yet we're condemning ourselves to even a further hell because we're not doing the things we enjoy. And as those were my words, those weren't the words she used, but as she was telling me this, I knew she was right. And my friend who is go check out the Top Gun Maverick episode. I want to say it's a few episodes back because we published it in July of 2022, but it's Why is Top Gun Maverick So Good with Landon Samiz. And Landon is my friend that is he's amazing at movies. It's interesting. His love for movies, I've definitely um, is contagious. It's very contagious. And the way he can break down and study movies. And so from being friends with him, he really tried to get me into watching more movies and has successfully got me to watch more movies. And at the time in 2019, the movie that I had not watched that I kept telling him I would watch was Star Wars. And I had actually, and this is so, this is so where my mindset was at the time. I only wanted to watch Star Wars movies because of the philosophy. I knew Joseph Campbell and his work had greatly inspired, and the hero's journey. I've always loved the hero's journey. And so even my reasoning for wanting to watch Star Wars in the first place was for personal development, and which again is good. And we're going to tie all of this in, but it was ironic that I didn't even want to watch it for joy. It was to study the philosophy of Campbell. And so anyway, start watching Star Wars, and I loved it. We have a really nice armchair. So I'm sitting in this armchair and I'm watching Star Wars, and I just felt so at peace in my body, more than any meditation had done. I was just being totally present with this film, and the things I started learning were mind-boggling to me. And I watched them, the prequels, the originals, and then I got into oh my gosh, the dumpster fire. I don't even think we should call them Star Wars. I think we should call them, I don't want to call them Dump Wars. Disney's Dump Wars. This is what I want to call them. And then I watched Disney's Dump Wars. And so I'm going, and I loved Qui-Gon. And one of the reasons, and I know this is in the Star Wars land, world, atmosphere, this is not a very highly valued take. I love The Phantom Menace. And technically, I had watched clips of The Phantom Menace when I was a freshman in high school because we were studying Plato's Republic, and again, back to the philosophy. And so I think it has a special place in my heart because that was the first Star Wars I'd ever interacted with, and it was the thing that encouraged me to watch Star Wars in the first place because my mom hated Star Wars. Oh, and it's one of those things as a kid, you kind of adopt the adults' opinions around you, not even realizing you haven't formed your own opinion about something. And so I just kind of adopted my mom's opinion of Star Wars was trash. It was just a bunch of bullshit out in space, da 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 da. And then I watched clips in my social studies class my freshman year of high school, and I loved it. And I think also my teacher obviously loved it so much that his love for it, again, it's contagious. I think it wore off on me a little bit, but I really did enjoy it. And so I did end up going and renting The Phantom Menace, watched the whole thing, and but didn't, as of, I'm 14, 15, it's crazy. I went to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video to rent it, even at that time in 2000. That would have been like 2011, 2012. We still had movie houses, which is just crazy to say because it doesn't feel like that long ago, but a lot has changed since then. There's somebody out there listening to this that has no like that kind of knows what I'm talking about, but can't even imagine driving somewhere, going to get a movie and then driving back to watch it and then having to take it back again and most likely not taking it back again and stacking up the late fees. And that was always the worst part is when you kind of forgot that you had a late fee and then you go to rent another movie and they give you your total. It's like, what is that? Like, well, you have a lot of late fees from the last time you rented a movie. Okay, that's good. And um so yeah, anyway, but as I rewatched it in 2019, just so many of the golden nuggets that Qui-Gon laid out, I just was enamored by this. And for me, just being a very visual person, at that point, I start learning all these things that I'm supposed to be learning from books. I am now learning from movies. And when we start to think about it, the people at the top of their game, those are the movies most of us are watching. And so most of those people, screenwriters, directors, some actors and actresses, producers, they are very well read on psychology or philosophy and other things like that. So there's always so many golden nuggets laid out in movies if we really choose to listen and watch and pay attention. And especially if you're a visual learner, it's one of those things. Whenever I wonder how God, the universe, source intended things, I always revert back to nature. Well, how did God create nature? Because how he created nature is how she wants things to be. And so there are so like many different water sources that lead back to the ocean, right? There's all these different rivers, streams, lakes, and they all either go back to the ocean or go by like there's always different sources of water and different things leading into different things. Even if fresh water is going back, like there's all these different forms of water. There's multiple leaves on one tree. There's never just one answer for anything, is what I'm trying to say. That water metaphor did not come out the way that I wanted it to. But there's always more than one ways to get to the same result. And not all of us are going to learn our lessons the best from books. Not all of us are going to learn the best lessons from podcasts. But what if we could movies? And that has been my experience the last few years, is being able to learn these lessons from movies. So the ironic and most interesting thing is when I cut movies out because of wanting to do the best in this personal development self-help industry, I actually cut out one of the best ways that I learned my life's lessons. And that's why I think we need to quit the dialogue and the rhetoric of stop watching movies. It's not what we're doing, it's about how we're doing it. And no matter if we're going on a drive or we're reading a book, listening to a podcast, watching a movie, we can learn the lessons that God, source, our higher self wants us to learn, as long as we are being intentional, tuning in and listening and paying attention. That's all we have to do. We don't have to read a specific book. We don't have to watch a certain or take a certain course. We just have to be able to tune in properly. So how do we do that? Well, one of the ways that I have started doing it is there is this concept called neurocoupling. And so as I'm telling a story, you're just automatically, your subconscious is starting to think about how this applies to you. The same thing happens as we are watching movies. And so, as you're watching the movie, there are certain things that your subconscious is starting to pop up of how this applies to you. So, the action step that I want you to take today is go watch one of your favorite movies or a movie with one of your favorite characters. Doesn't matter. And there's two things I want you to be mindful of and pay attention to. One is what are the lessons that your favorite character in this movie is learning? Because those are the lessons you are here to learn. How are they learning them? What is their journey to the lesson? How does that apply to your life? So even if you're watching Lord of the Rings, you're probably not taking a ring to Mordor. However, what is Frodo learning in that? What is Sam learning in that? And I know it's like Sam's perfect. Sam's not learning anything. He is. He is. Definitely, spoiler alert, I guess if you haven't watched the film, when Sam and Frodo go their separate ways, Sam is learning things. Sam is learning things with Gollum. I think if I look at Sam, he really dismissed his intuition. He didn't, but he did. And I wouldn't say dismissed his intuition. I would say more he really didn't put his foot down, with the Gollum thing. Yes, there was things with Gollum Smeagol that maybe they needed him, maybe they didn't. Debatable. But he really, in attempt to please Frodo, did not really, really put his foot down, or, there was something. So maybe that's a lesson for you to learn. Again, it's your interpretation that's going to help you figure out the lesson. And then the last thing that I want you to do is, what qualities does your favorite character have that you have buried or dismissed? So, oh my gosh, I love Aragorn. Okay, just to go off Lord of the Rings a little bit more with Aragorn. I hope I'm saying that's the one thing with Lord of the Rings, the names. I'm not dyslexic, but sometimes I think I am, and the names and whatever like scrambled eggs I get in my brain sometimes when it comes to words and language, which is ironic because writing is like my favorite. Writing and is like my favorite thing, and yet my words just have scrambled eggs of their own sometimes. We'll talk about that another day. But the names like Sauron and Saruman and And so anyway, back to Aragorn. Okay, he's one of my favorite characters. Well, there's a reason he's one of my favorite characters. We cannot see in others that which we do not have in ourselves. And so if we are noticing and recognizing a quality, a trait, a characteristic in somebody else, it is because we have those qualities in ourselves. So when I look at Aragorn, I look at him as this, selfless, just deeply caring leader. He doesn't really want to step up and, oh my gosh, it's so crazy when I start talking. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is very accurate for where I'm at in my life. He doesn't really want to step up, but he knows he needs to. He knows he must. And even I think this is only, again, spoiler alert, I think this is only in the extended version. I don't think it's in the theatrical version. When he, I think they're at the gates of Mordor and he ends up decapitating the, whatever, I don't even know what they're called, but one of Sauron's talking heads, I guess, when he makes sure his head don't talk no more. And, the way he's like, I refuse to believe that, Frodo is not here and, we're not giving up and they're going to do it. And like that deep belief, I could not see all of those things because here's the thing. Someone else can watch that same movie and totally dismiss that about Aragorn. Maybe I fucking love Gimli too. Maybe their favorite character is Gimli because they're here to learn. And so they see all this, how Gimli is like disgruntled, but yet he starts to open up and, he's like, never thought I'd, side by side by an elf. He's like, what about side by side with a friend? He's like, like those just little sweet moments. And because I see them, I have that within me too. I have this disgruntled grandpa vibe that Gimli gives off. I got that in me. That's why I can say it. And but maybe someone doesn't see those in Aragorn because they're more paying attention to Gimli because their subconscious, their higher selves needs them to learn the lessons that Gimli has to teach them. So go watch your favorite movie, pay attention to your favorite characters, pay attention to the lessons, and then when you're done, journal about it, or just make a note of it in your phone. These are the traits I noticed. This is the lessons I've noticed. This is how it applies to my life. And then just name one thing you need to do, because part of what all of these characters have to do, this is the hero's journey. They have to reclaim, when we talk about reclaiming parts of ourselves that we've buried or that we've lost, that is a part of the hero's journey. That's the inner work of the hero's journey. That is defeating the villain within. That is, defeating the villain within. I think I'm going to leave it at that. And so, those are your action steps for today. Go watch your favorite movie. Do all the things that I just talked about. If you need to pause and go re-listen to the steps that I just said, please do so now. And now let's get into what I recently have learned from Harry Potter. Um, I've watched these movies so many times. I've read the books. I've read all the books once. I've read the first book multiple times. I really want to reread all of them again. Um, so I am going to be referencing the movies just because that's what's freshest in my brain. And the thing that I recently learned about from Harry Potter, especially in regards to childhood trauma, I'm not going to get in depth into my story here. You could go purchase and read my book, The Barn Off of Colfax Lane, to get the full story. Um, but I've talked about it before about experiencing childhood sexual assault and what I learned. And it's interesting because the fourth movie, Goblet of Fire, is actually my least favorite movie, but I kept feeling called to watch the graveyard scene like multiple times. And sometimes when I need to watch a movie, I will do just that. I will just go to the scene and watch it because again, my subconscious, my higher self is telling me to pay attention right here. And what's interesting is specifically in this scene is where I got this insight. And the insight was when we meet the villain is not when we face the villain. And when we face the villain is not when we defeat the villain. So Harry meets Voldemort in what I would almost call the prequel of the first movie. He faces the villain in the Goblet of Fire. He defeats the villain at the end of the Deathly Hallows. And how this applied specifically to childhood trauma for me, specifically childhood sexual assault, is when I met the villain. So if you've read my book, The Barn Off Colfax Lane, his pseudonym is Todd. I'm just going to use Todd. So when I met Todd was not when I defeated Todd or faced Todd. And when I faced Todd is not when I defeated him. So I met him. I met him before the sexual assault actually happened, what I would call our meeting, like when the event happened. So for Harry losing his parents and Voldemort obviously ultimately trying to Avada Kedavra, Avada, I can never say that, Avada him, we're just going to say that. For me, it was meeting Todd, getting sexually assaulted by him. I would call that my meeting of my villain. And then I would call the facing of my villain. So for Harry, facing Voldemort in the graveyard. And for me, it would be facing Todd in the courtroom. I would even put my book in the facing part of it. What I would call for us on the healing journey of trauma, defeating is where no ounce of the circumstances no longer dictates our actions, how we show up in the world. We have neutralized that. I have not got to the end of the Deathly Hallows in my own personal journey. I have not personally defeated the villain yet, meaning I very much still have a shield up, energetically, physically, emotionally, even spiritually, to protect myself. And I'm doing that because of what I went through with Todd. And that is how I know I have not defeated the villain yet. And why I wanted to share this specifically today is because I want us all to bring awareness and honesty to where we are actually at, and how we can get help getting to the next stage. So if you're here, you've already met your villain. So where are you? Do you need to face your villain or do you need to defeat your villain? Facing, like I said, it for me, it was writing the book. It was standing up in the courtroom. It was like it was, if I have to put it into one sentence, it's you can't hurt me anymore. Defeating is I'm not going to hurt myself anymore because of what you did to me, because of what happened in our little hero's journey together. Because by me shielding myself, protecting myself from the world, ultimately the person that I'm hurting is me. And it's not about, of course I have a reason. Of course I have a reason. I don't think there's anybody who I could tell my story and say like, "Oh, I don't understand why you're doing that. I don't under." Everybody would understand. It's not about understanding. It's when is it time to put it down because it's no longer serving us. This is no longer helping me. It's now actually hurting me and preventing the behaviors that show up because of this protection are preventing me from living the life that I genuinely want to live, aka the villain still has a certain amount of control over me. Before Harry truly defeats Voldemort in the Deathly Hollows, he has control over him because you can't even, the one thing Harry did have like power over is he would say Voldemort's name and, it's like, how dare you speak his name? You must be so brave. Well, then they put that jinx or that whatever they called it, I can't remember, to where if you said his name, the Death Eaters would know and they could come find you. It was a call, if you will. And so now Harry's even dictating his decisions because he knows if he says Voldemort's name, they're going to be able to find him. Again, all righteous things, but Voldemort still has that control over Harry. It's not until he defeats him at the end of the Deathly Hollows. But look at all the things that Harry had to go through to be at the point to defeat the villain. And what's really interesting, again, I truly believe that God, universe, will come through anybody in whichever way they need. And when we think about that moment when Harry is in the forest getting ready to face like something inside of Harry had to die for Harry to reclaim who he truly was. And that's the part where I'm at with facing. There's a part of Todd within me that needs to die because I have put that layer of protection there to protect myself from him. It's not really as literal as Harry Potter, where it's a part of him in me, but it's a part of our time together that I developed that part then and am keeping it in there. And so, yes, in a lot of ways, it does feel like there's a part of him still in me because it's controlling my moves. Like I've got this weird little puppet inside that's like, do this, do that. Or if you don't do this, this will happen. Or if you do this will happen. So don't do it. And that's not what I don't want it to be that way anymore. Um, so to be honest with you, on that front, I don't fully have an answer yet. I'm still, okay, what does Michaela really have to do to defeat this villain? I don't fully know yet. I've got a few hunches. I was listening to a podcast with Rachel Platten, who, if you know the song Fight Song, she sang and wrote Fight Song. She was on Lewis Howe's The School Greatness podcast, and I've been sitting with this concept. I don't fully have the concept into words yet. I'll just share what I do have so far. But I'm starting to think that art is the only way out of the darkness, that us creating something. And I've been getting this visual of, we'll go back to Harry, like when we think about when Harry and Voldemort are at this like King's Cross type situation. It wasn't actually King's Cross, right? But between this life and the next life, I guess you would call it. And there's that like piece of Voldemort that went there to die. When we think about that, like how I vision that inside my own self is like it's this bag of hurt and trauma, and in this bag there's all these marbles of just like black marbles of darkness. How do I transmute those marbles into something beautiful? And I think the only way to do that is art. And that's really, where I'm at in my life is it's time to create. It's time to not act like the ugly and the bad is not there. It's time to transmute it into something really beautiful. And, as happy as I am with I've been getting better. I've been struggling with the book a little bit. It's not a beautiful book as far as um I really didn't talk about, I just told the story. I didn't really talk about what I learned, if any good. I just talked about the hard thing, which is good. We need to do that. And now it's like, okay, now how do I turn that into something truly like beautiful? how do I transmute this mess into magic? And it's interesting that that's the saying that came out of my mouth, because that's really what, you know, there's this theory that Harry, like, basically from being locked in the cupboard, like, had this psychosis and he made all of this up. Like, it was always all in his head. Doesn't mean it's not real, but it never was. He never actually went to Hogwarts. It was just this imagination inside of his head. And so if we take it at that, like, I don't believe that's what Harry Potter is at all. I believe in that universe wizards actually exist. But if we just take it at that, if we take the thing of um muggles as non-magic folk, you know, we have muggles in our world of people who just don't believe in magic. But what is magic? And one of my favorite lines about magic is from there's a band from the 60s called the Love and Spoonful, and they have a song like, "Do you believe in magic? In the young girl's heart, how the music can free her. Whenever it starts, it's magic." And one of the lines in the song is, "The magic's in the music and the music's in me." AKA the music and the magic has always been within. And to me, that's what real magic is. It's this ability to transmute the dark back into light. And for me, you know, even if we think about when Voldemort transmuted, like Voldemort kind of transmuted himself because it was like his own spell that backfired on him. But that's like another thing. But it was this like darkness into light. And even this was in the book. I wish they would put this in the movie, but even like Harry, you know, using the Elder Wand to transmute and bring his wand back to life. So I don't have an exact answer on how we defeat the villain yet. As I said, I'm still working on defeating the villain. We have the answers within. So I just want you to sit with it. Where are you at on your journey? Have you just met the villain? So do you now need to face the villain, or do you now need to defeat the villain? Just go on a walk and ask yourself, what do I need to do to face this villain? What do I need to do to defeat this villain? As I said, I've been sitting with it, and I really think for me, it's creation, it's art, it's taking that dark and turning it into light. So anyway, that is my most recent lesson from Harry Potter about childhood trauma. Thank you for listening to this episode. This episode was a lot of fun for me to make, and so I hope it was as fun for you to listen to as it was for me to record. It's really fun learning how to bring all my passions together. And my friend Landon, who I mentioned earlier, my strategy brain can really overthink things sometimes of, you know, if you have a brand, you have like 5 topic pillars and you just rotate through those and da 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 da. However, like, I am my brand and I am all of these things. And, you know, my friend Landon said, you know, you always tie things back together. Like, you always tie movies back into the work you do, or you always tie, and that's like the trust and faith I have to have just within myself. Like, I always tie it back together. I got this. So thank you for just allowing me to explore all these different passions of mine and tying them back together. And I really hope, if nothing else, this gave you a new perspective on movies. If like you've been deep into the self-help healing journey and have totally cut movies out of your life, I really hope this episode encourages you to just bring a movie back into your life. I don't know why I just feel the need to say this, but it needs it needs to be Back to the Future. I freaking love that movie. There's so much magic in this movie. So take this as your sign to go watch Back to the Future. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Western Hippie Podcast. I'm your host, Michaela, here with my co-host, Willard, and we will talk to you next time.